Is Rico Scott Alabama's best kept secret on the roster? Let's talk about it. What is up, everybody? Clint Lamb with A to Z Sports and Cover Crimson. When you look at Alabama's wide receiver room and just everything they not only have coming back, but also what they've been able to add, whether it be through the high school ranks or the transfer portal, this is easily going to be one of the best wide receiver rooms in all of college football. But there was something that caught my eye last week. Ryan Williams, star sophomore receiver, he made a post on Instagram sharing several pictures, mostly of himself, obviously. But there was one that caught my attention, and it was of four Alabama wide receivers, three of which were the projected starters in Isaiah Horton, Ryan Williams, and Jeremy Bernard. But that fourth receiver is the one that I want to talk about because it was Rico Scott. Now, just because he was part of a picture doesn't necessarily mean he's automatically going to be wide receiver 4 in Alabama's offense. But when you start looking at how he's trending and how he finished last season, the buzz that he generated in the spring, I understand that Alabama's got a lot of options at wide receiver. Jalen Hill, Cole Adams, Jalen Mbakwe, Lazier Brooks, the true freshman. There are several guys who could get into the mix here. But Rico Scott has been a constant. Now, he wasn't a super highly rated, highly regarded guy coming out of high school, but he was a 4-star recruit. He ranked outside the top 250, but he had several prominent schools going after him, and he's got a skill set that you saw they could potentially build around for the future. But I don't think anybody quite thought that he was going to come in and make an immediate impact, and he didn't. And really, the only time he started to get a larger role within the offense was down the stretch when Alabama was missing several receivers due to injury or guys who had departed through the transfer portal. You started to see him get a little bit more involved, and they only had, I want to say, 4 or 5 scholarship receivers for that bowl game against Michigan. You saw a little bit more of Rico Scott at that point, but it's been more so this offseason, and the buzz that he has generated has caused me pause as far as trying to determine or figure out who Alabama's wide receiver 4 is going to be. Now, I looked at this entire room, and I thought, okay, I could totally see it being Jalen Hill. This is a guy who was going to be a big part of the offense last year. He's coming off of a pretty gruesome, pretty severe injury, but he's got a lot of talent, former top 50 recruit. You look at a guy like Cole Adams, another guy who was in the rotation last year. Injury obviously cost him his season, but he's got, some potential to be an underneath option for you. You look at a guy like Jalen Mbakwe, who is one of the best athletes on the team. There's no question about it, but he's making that transition from defense. And then you look at a guy like Lazier Brooks, a true freshman who, kind of similar to Rico Scott, wasn't super highly rated from a recruiting ranking standpoint, but you knew this guy had talent. You knew he was way better than those recruiting rankings would indicate. And he's a guy who's generated quite a bit of buzz in the spring too. And I think he's going to be a part of the rotation. So now it's about determining who's going to be Alabama's wide receiver 4. And Rico Scott is one who probably doesn't get mentioned enough. In fact, I talked a lot during the spring about Alabama's wide receiver room, and I had a source text me and say, hey, you're talking about the wide receivers. Great. They're going to be excellent, but you need to be talking about Rico Scott more. And ever since then, I've been looking at him through a different lens. And as I've started to pay attention, and you hear former players kind of bragging about how he's starting to take the next step, and he was developing behind the scenes, and he was a breakout guy to keep an eye on. And then you get these texts from people behind the scenes. I mean, you definitely think that this guy has the ability to not only become one of Alabama's not starting receivers, but heavily part of the rotation. This guy could end up making a name for himself in college football. And then when Jeremy Bernard and or, potentially Isaiah Horton following the 2025 season, Rico Scott could be in a situation where he's ready to step up and assume wide receiver 2 or wide receiver 3 responsibilities alongside Ryan Williams. So, this guy has the ability to play inside and out. He can play the Z. He can play the H. I think he can win all 3 levels of the field. Very fun player. Great worker behind the scenes. Definitely goes about his business the right way. And he has the respect of that locker room. So, excited to see what Rico Scott's able to do. Love this wide receiver room in general. But that's one that Alabama fans definitely need to be keeping an eye on in 2025.